Hello, everyone. I'm Jenny Ravelo, Global Health Reporter for Devex. Thank you so much for staying with us and continuing to tune in to the future of development finance, financing a post pandemic world. If you can recall, back in January, the WHO Executive Board agreed to establish a working group to tackle the issue of WHO's unsustainable financing. WHO has been operating with highly earmarked voluntary contributions that account for over 80% of its budget, leading to an unbalanced portfolio where some technical programs are left significantly underfunded. So, health experts have really called for more sustainable, predictable, flexible financing for the organization. We're following this closely and reporting on the latest developments. So, if you haven't subscribed to Devex Checkup, please do. But today I'm speaking with Björn Kümmel, Deputy Head of the Global Health Division, German Federal Ministry of Health, and Chair of the WHO Working Group on Sustainable Financing, to give us insights on what progress has been made on this discussion and what we can expect in the coming months. Bjorn, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, the working group has met four times now since its creation. The last meeting was in September. I'm curious, what progress have you made in terms of finding a solution to WHO's unsustainable financing? What are the ideas that the working group is leaning toward more of to recommend to the broader World Health Assembly?
So indeed, much has happened in between the fourth meeting and now, and will still be happening until the end. So practically, our mandate goes to January. We will have to present a report to the executive board in January. So we still have some time to go, but we practically only have one substantive meeting left mid-December. So where were we in September? In September, we had a very profound meeting. We discussed the proposals coming from the IPPPR, which is the Independent Panel for Pandemic Preparedness and Response, which was commissioned by the WHO in order to tell us the lessons to be learned from this pandemic. And they had explicit proposals also with regards to the financing of WHO, namely that member states should boost up their contributions, their assessed contributions, the membership fee, up to 2/3 of the core budget of WHO. The core mandate should be financed through assessed contributions, and the remaining part, 1/3 from what the IPPR proposed, should be financed through replenishment. And we did discuss this in our fourth meeting. In between the fourth meeting and now, we had the various regional committees of WHO discussing sustainable financing. WHO has this, three-layered structure, headquarters in Geneva, obviously 150 country offices, and in between it has the regional offices, and it counts much on the support and commitment from the regions. So there are 6 different regions, and all of them have their regional committees on a ministerial level in autumn, so in September and October, and they all discussed sustainable financing. I had the honor and pleasure to brief them on our deliberations, and there was strong support and a strong new dynamic. Practically more than 2/3 of all member states that intervened on the issue of sustainable financing were calling for a substantive increase in assessed contributions, which we never had before. So practically there's a strong positive dynamic with regards to really making change happen now and really addressing the historic challenge of sustainable financing to WHO. And the two main solutions at hand currently are the increase of the assessed contributions and potentially the adaptation of a replenishment model to the WHO governance.
You talked about the assessed contributions, and there's a lot of health experts out there that's really calling for this. It's due time, everyone is saying. Um, how likely is it that this will be adopted by the whole World Health Assembly?
Well, that is to be seen. That remains to be seen. I guess it's a learning exercise for all of us. I think when, at least when I took the chairmanship of this exercise, I didn't think that we would be where we currently are, that such a political momentum would be created, such a critical mass. So let's see where we end. There's still a long way to go. Not everybody is convinced yet, but many, I would say the majority of member states who are participating vocally in the deliberations have expressed their support to an AC increase. So we will see in the end. I think you're right. The experts tell us one thing: increase the ACs. And it's not only some experts, it's practically all experts. So there's a concrete consensus among experts, also high-level experts. So the Independent Panel for Pandemic Preparedness, the IOC, which is a specific panel that recommends actions for the emergency program. We have the Independent Expert Advisory Committee, which is, again, a body which provides expertise independent to WHO on finances. And the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board has just been issued last week. And they all say the one thing: there is one magic bullet to sustainable financing of WHO, and that is increase the membership fee. We are all proud that WHO is a member state driven organization, but the reality is it's not member state owned. As you mentioned at the start, only roughly 15% of all finances are contributed through the membership fee. 85%, even growing potentially in the future, are coming in through individual donors. And many say that WHO is driven to a large extent by those individual donors and not by the member states. And this is exactly what we need to address. There's a major misalignment between governance and willingness to pay for it.
You mentioned there's huge support now for that proposal, but not everyone is yet on board. So who is supportive and who is not at the moment?
Well, I tend to say it in a positive way. So who is supportive? So there is a strong support from the African region. I think all 47 member states are very much behind this AC increase, and they have moved. At the start, they weren't. They were also skeptical, but they are very much in favor. The member states from the Southeast Asian region have expressed a strong support for an AC increase and also for exploring the replenishment model. In what I heard from the EMRO region, so the Arab country, or also the Arab countries, they all expressed strong support to finding a solution, including an AC increase. Just last week, the Western Pacific region held its regional committee, and there again, I think 17 member states took the floor, most of them ministers, and I think 15 explicitly said they were in favor of a substantive AC increase. In the European region, the same. So I think there's a growing momentum, and I think that in the end, I'm always saying, if in the last 30 years, we've tried to address this, and we haven't found a long-term solution to the challenge of sustainable financing. If in the wake of this greatest global crisis that I at least have experienced, and I hope never to experience something like this again, and I'm sure there's a broad consensus on this, if in the wake of this crisis we are unable to fix this historic challenge, we will not get a second chance in the WHO. And I'm saying also to all member states, if we are not finding a consensus, and if we are not saying we are moving forward into one specific direction, then that's also a decision we are taking, namely that we are sticking to the status quo, which is, and I think everybody agrees, unacceptable. And this is, I think, a strong agreement among member states. And even worse, the world does not wait for the boldness of 194 WHO member states. Indeed, already while we are negotiating potentially an AC increase, or while the working group that I have the pleasure to chair is still discussing this, other organizations are further growing, and there are also ideas of creating new, powerful organizations, such as the US and Norwegian proposal for a new fund to be created at the World Bank for pandemic preparedness and response, coming from the IPPR proposals. And I'm saying, well, this all just makes sense if it is built around a strong and a stronger WHO, a really strengthened one, which we believe is necessary.
You mentioned about the US, and I wonder where they are in the assessed contributions debate. Are they on board on it as well, or still
I think it's clear that the US, like others, as the US, I think everybody knows, is the largest contributor to assessed contributions. The US currently provides, I think, 22% of the entire assessed contribution. So it's fair to say that obviously the US needs to be on board, and the US needs to reflect. It will be in absolute terms the largest part. I can only say that so far I understand that everybody is constructively engaging and really tries to put their power together in order to move this train forward. And I'm sure we will find a solution, and we will find a solution in consensus here. I think that we all have an interest in a strong WHO. In the end, I think we're coming to more or less the test of this. The strengthening of the WHO has been high on the agenda for long. But there is no strengthening of the WHO unless we fund WHO better than we've been doing this in the past through an increase of assessed contributions. So in the end, the test will be, are member states really in favor of a strong WHO? Because if they are, then there is no other option than to increase the assessed contributions, well, obviously linked to other reforms that need to come on governance, transparency, and accountability, and the replenishment. I think they need come hand in hand, but we shouldn't say first further increases on accountability, transparency, and governance, and then we are only then able to increase assessed contributions. We've heard that for too long, and I think it's a tactic to postpone the decision that we need to take in consensus after this pandemic.
I just want to ask about this because around the time you're having the fourth meeting of the working group, a report alleging, sexual abuse by some WHO staff during the last Ebola outbreak came out. I wonder if how that affected the discussions of the working group on financing WHO.
Well, it didn't directly affect the working group itself. I remember quite well that I had to more or less postpone or break my working group and say, let's now move over to the briefing that was held by the Secretariat when the report was announced, and because I felt the need to allow everybody to follow it because it's so high on the agenda. I think there are also links. Because the way we are funding WHO obviously doesn't allow WHO to to have the right finances in place to take the appropriate action, to set up the policies that are needed, to take preventive steps, and to send the right people to the right locations. It's not only about obviously preventing sexual abuse, harassment, etc., but also about security. WHO is severely lacking funding that is not bound to specific technical areas. The one area that is chronically underfunded and that practically or almost no donor provides funding to is the so-called enabling function. And the enabling function is legal, is the accountability function, is the investigator, and is the ethics office that takes care of the policies to prevent sexual harassment and abuse. So these functions are chronically underfunded because donors, they are not sexy for donors apparently. Donors don't fund them on a voluntary basis, and they heavily depend on assessed contributions. However, assessed contributions are dried out. They haven't grown over the past. And this, I think, so there is a link also to the ongoing work of the working group that I have the pleasure to chair.
I think we have just 1 minute. Just the last thing. What should we expect in the coming months, Bjorn, on the work of the working group?
Well, I have the pleasure to be in Geneva for the next 3 days. The bureau, so I will meet my vice chairs, the 5 vice chairs. We will be drafting a zero draft of the report. We have already I have asked all member states to send in their proposals for bold recommendations. I've been working on them already today. To a large extent, they are very constructive and positive. Obviously, they are all constructive and positive, but many of them, the vast majority, calls for a substantive AC increase and the replenishment, among other things. We will write the draft zero, and then we will come to the member states. We will discuss this with the entire membership of the working group mid-December, and then we will see where we stand. My hope is that we really learn the lessons from this pandemic, and that includes to really sustainably finance WHO through, well, a bold increase in assessed contributions.
Well, thank you so much, Bjorn, for sharing all of these insights, and I look forward to speaking with you again as you, finalize these things at the WHO.
With pleasure. Anytime again. It was a pleasure. Thank you.